Guys, I think I'm sick. Sick at backing up all my data. Oh, okay.
For real though, we all know how important backups are. That's why we probably shouldn't trust ourselves to manually, consistently take them and manage them effectively. So in this video, we'll be talking about how I use ZFS, a couple dozen lines of bash, and a cron job to make sure we automate our backups, whether you're working with something as simple as this USB drive or something as complex as nasty over here. Let's get to it.
I'll be real with you. There are existing backup solutions that are probably going to be more robust than what we're going to build here today. That being said, one of the goals of this channel is to build things from scratch so we can take a look under the hood and learn what's actually happening. As we build up our backup solution, there's three things that we want to keep in mind. We want to be able to take snapshots of data, so kind of like local copies. We want to be able to move those local copies over to other devices so we have some redundancy. That's where we get true backups. And then we want to be able to prune old backups so we're not using up all of our storage with just backups over and over, just thousands of backups. Lastly, of course, we want to be able to do all of this automatically. Nobody wants to memorize all of those ZFS commands and run them one by one themselves, right? Right? With those needs in mind, ZFS gives us a way to manage our snapshots and data, as well as move it to other devices, and Bash and Cron give us a way to automate those processes. Let's start by talking about how ZFS helps us. Aside from the fact that it's basically magic, ZFS does give us, in this case, two useful concepts. First, a Zpool is really just a logical abstraction for some storage that you can put stuff on. A pool of storage, if you will. It's a little more complicated than that, but that's good enough for now. After that, we've also got datasets. Datasets are just collections of files that we want to group together, usually based on the file hierarchy or directory structure. With ZFS, we can even take snapshots of existing datasets, and we can send and receive them to go live on different Zpools, even if those pools are on different devices. It's kind of incredible. Okay, enough yapping. Let's just demo that. Here we are on my main server, Chewy. Chewy's been set up with ZFS boot menu. If you don't know anything about that, I made a whole video on ZFS boot menu. It basically lets us snapshot our entire root file system, so you have a really good recovery mechanism. But that's a whole other topic. So first thing we're gonna do is do a Zpool list. This shows us our one Zpool, which is named zroot. It's making use of the one NVMe drive in that box. If we do Zpool status, we can actually see that it's housed on SDA2. It tells us that it's online, all that sort of fun stuff. Cool. But what about the data that lives on that? For that, we can do ZFS list. There's a whole bunch of other stuff. The important parts are these. We have zroot, so they're all living on this pool. And then there's root Debian. This is the root file system for that server. And then we also have zroot home. This is where the user home directories are. That's literally this place here. Okay, so let's talk about how you create a Zpool with some drives. First thing you're going to do is use ls-block to find your block storage devices. So we're going to start with that. And you can see I've got SDB here and SDA. These are two different drives. The first one, SDA, is the actual boot drive of this computer, and then SDB is a little USB thingy that I've got hanging off the side. So if I wanted to create a Zpool with SDB as the only drive in it, it's as simple as sudo zpool create. We give it a name. It's super common in ZFS tutorials to use the name tank for some reason. I don't know. And then we give it a list of drives. In this case, we're just going to use the one, but I'm not actually going to execute this because there's stuff on that drive and I don't want to erase it. But this is what you would do. Once we've got a Zpool, we're going to want a dataset to manage. So let's start by listing what datasets we already have. I'm going to want to work off of zroot's /home. So zroot again is our pool, and then home is an existing data set that we've got. I'm just going to create a data set inside home. You can actually nest ZFS data sets like this, just as an example. So what we're going to do is do sudo ZFS create, and then we say the pool name. If we have an existing ZFS data set that we want to be the parent of this, we can list that there. And then next up, I'm just going to make this one called YouTube. So we create that, and if we cd back out to home, pwd, we're in home, and we ls, we see YouTube's been created. Cool. What we're going to do now is just hop in here, add something. We're going to create this little markdown file called Nathan's super important data. So we have something worth snapshotting and backing up. I'll put something in there. Yo, hello. So there's something. We're going to save it. And now we have a change that we might want to snapshot. So if we want to snapshot this data, we can go ahead and do sudo ZFS snapshot. And then we just give the name of this thing. So it starts at zroot, and then we go home, and then it's YouTube. And then we need to give it some designation because there should be, over time, many snapshots of this thing. So we do @ and then we give it some name. And now if we do a ZFS list -t snapshot, so list our snapshots, we can see that we have zroot/home/YouTube at YouTube video. And if I wanted to make another one, we could pop over here, video 2, right? And we can run the same thing and we see YouTube video 2. Now we've got snapshots rolling. A quick tip so you don't end up with a bunch of ridiculous snapshot names is just to use the date. So we can use the date command here, and I personally prefer to use day, month, year format. So that's nice and simple. We just give it date plus, and then %d, dash %month, %year, %year, and it outputs it. So we can just throw that into our snapshot command with a little command substitution. So we can do date dash, so many dashes, %y, boom. And we run this again and we can see dated snapshots now. All right, so that's the gist of creating snapshots with ZFS. It's really freaking easy. I think we're all in agreement. That's pretty freaking cool. But even cooler than that is being able to send entire snapshots or even data sets to whole other Zpools. So let's show how that works. In this example, what we're going to do is take one of those snapshots on Chewy over here and send it over to a Zpool on Nasty, my NAS. So earlier we created this snapshot here with the date, and over here on Nasty, we can see if we list these, no such thing exists. So, you know I'm not lying to you. What we're gonna do is send it over to this machine. So let's take a look at this command because it's pretty freaking long, but when you break it apart, it makes sense. Basically what we're saying is we're doing a ZFS send of this particular snapshot, and then we're also going to SSH into Nathan, the user at Nasty, and then do a ZFS receive of that data set. It'll ask me for my password for the SSH. You can get around this with like SSH keygen and authorized keys. I won't talk about that in this video, but it would make the automation a lot easier. Once we run that, we can hop over to Nasty and we can do a quick ZFS list, and you'll see zroot/home/YouTube pops up right here. It's that easy. If we do a ZFS list-t snapshot, you'll see we've got this specific snapshot as well. There are a few quirks about sending snapshots over time. With ZFS, if you want to keep sending snapshots, you need to use the incremental flag and tell it from where you're starting. So if I do something like, let's say I create a new snapshot, ZFS. We've got this one for today. I'm going to create one for tomorrow. We'll pretend that I took it tomorrow. And then we list these snapshots. You'll see one dated for tomorrow. This is getting complicated. If I try to send this snapshot on its own, like this, just with dated tomorrow, what I'll get after I give it my SSH password is this. Basically, it's saying, hey, there's already stuff here on Nasty. You can't send me everything without overwriting it. Okay, fair enough. The way we get around this is to do incremental. We do this with the -I flag, and we tell it from where to where. The original one was the zroot/home/YouTube at today's date, and that works. So when we use incremental, we just have to tell ZFS from which snapshot to which snapshot. And then if we pop over here, we've got both of them living on Nasty, ready to use to restore this device whenever we want. Cool. At this point, I hope you can see why we would need bash. I don't know about you, but there's no way I am remembering that entire thing and typing it out every single time. It's not happening. It's not happening. So we're going to put it in a bash script so we don't have to. Our computers will remember for us. So I was thinking about how best to demonstrate the construction of this bash script, and I realized coding this all on screen would take a lot of time and just be frustrating and kind of boring for the users. Readers? Watchers? Viewers. So instead, what I've got is two files here. The first one, this planning document that we've got, I've just got it open up in vanilla Vim with a few little configurations, but no plugins. And then I've got the complete script here. I'm going to walk through the plan. And then step through the completed script. And whenever there's something complicated or kind of weird, I'm going to jump over to the right panel and show how this would execute and how it like solves our problem. Cool? Cool. What we need to do to write the script is batch all of the things we've already been doing, like taking snapshots and sending and receiving them, into a bash script. What we need to do is take a snapshot, send it to another machine. Remember, we have to do this incrementally, so we need to know what the last snapshot was so that we can say we want to do snapshots between here and here, the new one. And then we need to prune snapshots on both machines. Now, I haven't shown how to destroy ZFS snapshots, but it's literally as simple as ZFS destroy thing. Nice and easy. So to do that, there's a couple things we need to figure out. We need to know what our source Zpool plus dataset are. We need to know the remote Zpool plus dataset. This is for the send and receive functionality. Then we need to know the SSH user and remote host name. Remember, we were SSHing into Nasty so that we could send the snapshot over there. We need to know today's date because we're using that in the creation of our snapshots. And then we need to know what the most recent snapshot is so we can do the incremental stuff. Here, I've got a couple of variables that are going to hold some of this information, right? So we've got our source pool, we've got a remote host name, we've got a remote pool, we have our SSH user, and I'm going to be doing some logging as we go. We also just grabbed that date command from earlier and threw it into a variable. If you're not familiar with bash scripting, variables are just things that will hold some information, and then you can use the name of the variable later instead of like rewriting the command or rewriting the full data. Let's jump over to our full script and see how this works. So at the top, we've got our usual shebang line. This just tells us that when we make this script executable, you're going to execute it with bash. We've got our same variables. We've got a little function here that does the logging. It's called log message. It's really just an echo, which echoes the date at the start and then adds some information. This $1 basically says whatever stuff you give to this function, you're gonna put that there. And then we just throw it in log file, which we've got defined up here. Cool. So we're gonna use that a lot, basically through every step. We've got the step where we need to find the most recent snapshot. We're going to use this for the incremental stuff in a second. This one is kind of cool. So you can see we've got a couple of steps for this. We're going to walk through each one. So I'm going to jump over here to this other tmux panel, and we're going to copy the first bit. So we're going to say -h-t snapshot-o name. So all this is going to do, remember when we did ZFS list -t snapshot? This is just adding a couple more things to say, I really only want the names of the snapshot. Then I'm just going to clear these as we go because it can get pretty, I don't know, pretty, words are hard. Cluttered. There we go. I found the word. Next up, we're grepping. Grep is a utility that we can use to find specific text. What we're doing here is we're saying we're going to pass in the results of this, that ZFS list that we did earlier, and we're going to look for strings in this list that match source pool. So we're really just saying only give me snapshots for the data set that we're looking for. So let's run that. Now we're getting those results. Last thing we're going to do is this tail-n1. So what does tail do? Tail grabs the tail end of whatever list, and you can tell it -n tells you how many. If I've got this list, you can see in this, we have 4 examples. We're gonna do tail -n. If I do 2, we get 2. If I do 1, I get 1. If we put this all together, we get just the most recent ZFS dataset snapshot for this dataset. Pretty cool. And then we're just throwing that in a variable. This next part is really just saying, if there's an error, log the error and get the heck out. If you've written any Go, you'll recognize, if not error, do error stuff. And then we go on to creating today's snapshot. I'm going to copy some of this, but you can already see here, we're just making the snapshot. Same way we made it earlier with stuff like this. We're just doing that. We've got our date today variable. I'm going to drop that here so we've got it available to us. Again, we're putting it in we're putting it in an environment variable. Since we have source pool and date today already set as environment variables, I'm just going to echo that to demonstrate what's happening. We get source pool, right, this guy, and then we get the date today, or at date today. That's the name of the snapshot that we want. All right, so we're creating today's snapshot, we're making a log, and again, we're just doing our quick, did this cause an error? If so, log that thing and get out. Now, here's the trickier part. This is our ZFS send. With our incremental, we're using today's snapshot over here. So we're saying from the last one to today's. And then we're doing the same thing as we did last time, which is just SSHing, but this time we're making use of our variables. When we do this like $ curly braces, that's saying go get me that variable. I'm going to use it in this string right here. Then we've got sudo ZFS receive. I have an error in here. I'm doing -f for force. I don't want to force this. It should work since we're using incremental. I shouldn't have to do any overwriting. So we're going to get rid of that. Let's demonstrate how the destroy command works here. I'm going to do here on nasty, my NAS, I've got these two snapshots from earlier. I'm going to get rid of those so that we can run this cleanly from scratch. We're going to do sudo ZFS destroy -r because I'm going to destroy the whole data set. -r is going to go through and recursively like destroy all of the snapshots as well. So we're gonna go zroot/home/YouTube, and just like that, they're gone. So if we do dash list snapshot, doesn't exist. If we do just a ZFS list, you'll see the YouTube dataset doesn't exist here either. Mission accomplished. When we're cleaning up old snapshots, let's say I want to keep one for each day of this week, or like the past 7 days. That's fairly common. More robust systems will do something like one for every month of the year, one for every week of this month, and one for every day of this week. We're not going to go through all that. I would recommend you do that with some existing software, which I'll probably link down below. So let's talk about this. This one's a little lengthy. It starts off with ZFS list name. So same thing we've seen before. We've got that same grep that we're doing, right, that we did earlier. So we're just looking for this data set and its snapshots. So we're grepping that. Instead of tail, this time we're using head. So instead of the tail end, we're looking at the starting end, or the front. Right. Let's talk about head. What? So let's grab this, and we're going to use our grep again. We're going to put these together to show what that does. You can see this time we're grabbing this same zroot/home/YouTube dataset. Now we're going to apply the head command to it. And so if we do -n2, we're going to get the first two, right? The ones at the top of that list. When we do a negative number, it says print all the lines excluding the last n. Think of it as positive numbers with head-n are going to give you the first n. Negative numbers are going to exclude the last n. The reason we do this is because if we have more than 7 snapshots, then we want to exclude the most recent 7, which are going to be at the bottom of that list. So we're excluding those. If I say xargs, what that does is for every item in this list, do a thing. We're going to say -n1. That just means do one of these commands for every item in the list. And I'm just going to echo them to demonstrate this. So you can see here, when I echo it, it just prints it out. If we go here again, so this time we're not excluding them, xargs is going to echo each one individually. And we get that. So instead of echoing, when we're pruning our list, we use ZFS destroy. And it passes in this name over to ZFS destroy. So this is a pretty interesting, useful string of bash commands. We're doing a lot of piping, but you can see how powerful bash can get when you start stringing things together like this. Over here on the left side, we just do that again. So that's pretty much all there is to it. Finally, we just log the message that the backup completed successfully. Last thing we need to do is fully automate this. So I could just execute that script every day and that would work, but I don't want to do that. That sounds boring, and then I have to do that every day. Why would I do that? Instead, I can make use of cron tab. So cron tab is, well, cron, I guess, is a tool that lives on your Linuxy systems that basically lets you run scripts every interval of time of your choosing, right? So it could be every day, it could be every week, it could be every 30 minutes, it could be every 30 minutes, but only on Tuesdays. Cron is cool, and we're going to make use of it now to run our script every single day. All right, so here we are in /home/Nathan. We've got backup.sh, and that's where this script lives. First thing we need to do is make use of chmod, because right now if I tried to run backup shell, it'd be like, but how do I do that? The file mode bits aren't set such that this file is executable, only read-writable. So let's do that. We could hit it with the chmod plus x, so plus executable, that's the way I think about it. Backup shell. Now if I ls again, because I've got fancy shell prompt, this sucker's green, and it tells me it's executable. Nice. Nice. I've moved backup.sh into a scripts folder. We can just do a pwd here to show us where we are. And recall that there are a lot of things that require sudo privileges to run this script, like ZFS requires it. Our log files were initially in var. I've moved them into this scripts folder as well. But because getting around all of these sudo privileges in this automated script would be a pain, I'm just going to use the sudo cron tab. So there's a cron tab for users, but there's also a cron tab for the super user. So let's do that. If I do sudo cron tab -e, it brings up this file where you go to list cron jobs. One of the nice things about it is it documents itself, like there's explanations in the file. Let's show off how we would run this script regularly. The format of this is which minute, which hour, which day of the month, which day of the week, and what are we doing on that time. Now that sounds convoluted and weird, but basically for the most part, what you do is you set asterisks for a lot of these fields, which says any, right? So if I want something to run daily, I can say I want it to run on the 0th minute. I want it to run on the 3rd hour, so like 3 a.m. I want it to run on any day of the month, any day of the week. Kind of makes sense. And our command is the shell script we just created, backup.sh. So remember that's in home, Nathan, scripts, backup.shell. There it is. Now, if I save that, it tells us cron tab installing new cron tab. If I do sudo cron tab -l, I assume -l for list, it shows us that that thing's there. So now this should run every day at 3 a.m. Now, if you're keen, you'll notice that there's a couple quirks here that we haven't quite resolved in this video. Most importantly, I think, is that during our initial process when we were showing off ZFS receive with SSH, we had to use password authentication. And that's obviously not going to work if we're automating this script, right? If it needs a password and there's nobody there to give it to it through standard in, then it's just going to hang and eventually, probably, hopefully, time out. To solve that problem, we can use SSH keygen. Now, I'm not going to cover that in this video because this video is already ridiculously long, but I will link to some tutorials down below in the description. If you've ever used GitHub, or at least in the last couple of years after they deprecated password authentication through HTTP, you've already done some SSH keygen stuff. And if you haven't, it's not too hard. The idea is pretty simple though. Basically, you create an SSH key on your local machine. It's got a public and private pair. You send the public one over to the server that you want to SSH into, and it does this like check between the two. Once that's set up, you can authenticate through the SSH keys instead of a password, which allows this automated like SSH connection, which is actually something you'll need to do if you're setting up Ansible, like I hope to do in a soon-to-be video. But other than that, that covers everything. From the start of this video, we've talked about what a backup actually is and how snapshots aren't true backups unless you have them on another machine. That way you get this kind of redundancy. We've talked about how to use ZFS to take snapshots, manage them, send them to other machines. Then we've talked about how to use bash and a couple of fun quirks with bash, like command substitution, creating variables, doing a lot of piping. So much piping. And lastly, we introduced cron tab, which is a really cool tool for automating processes or little scripts like this on any Linux machine you're working with. To wrap things up, I want to show off a couple of tools that would do something like we do, but more robust and a little bit more effectively. Because while this was a cool learning process, I don't think you should deploy this in your actual environment if you want reliable, consistent backups. A couple tools. ZFS itself is fantastic. I definitely highly recommend that. And making use of it with some existing open source software to do your backups would be great. So ZFS Auto Backup by Sciors, available on GitHub. I've heard some really good things about Sanoid by Jim Salter Jr.'s. That's how I'm going to pronounce that. Jim Salter Jr.'s. You can correct me if I'm wrong. A lot of people are making use of it to create backups. And ZREPL is another another tool you can make use of for automating your backup process. If you want to learn more about any of the tools we used here, primarily ZFS, Bash, and Cron, there are 3 resources I would highly recommend. DJ Ware's YouTube channel covers ZFS a lot. This guy is awesome, very knowledgeable, clearly been in the game for a while, and talks about ZFS quite a bit. Most recently, a really interesting video on getting ZFS working on Mac OS. So if you're doing things like video editing and you want to do backups through ZFS, pretty cool. I mean, obviously you can do video editing on other devices, but Mac OS is very common. So highly recommend DJ Ware's videos on ZFS, particularly the ZFS on Linux, the $1 billion file system, was a great primer for me. Next up, if you're watching my videos, you've probably seen Network Chuck. If you want to learn some bash scripting from scratch, he covers things really clearly with a lot of enthusiasm and fun, which I think is a super important thing if you're trying to teach and learn something that can feel as dry as bash when you're starting out. Highly recommend Network Chuck's bash scripting tutorials. And lastly, for crontab and other more specific Linux, niche Linux tools, I would again highly recommend Learn Linux TV. Particularly this video on scheduling tasks with Cron would be a great next step. Anyways, thank you so much for watching. I'll catch you in the next one. If you enjoyed this video or got something out of it, I would love it if you commented about other things you'd like to see me make videos on. Also, it would be nice if you liked and subscribed. However, not necessary. All right, I'll catch you next time.